years old. So I want to talk about child marriage here in the United States. And this came about because there was recently a bill, and this bill was passed over in West Virginia. Okay. This is recently, like within the last week. Okay. That a bill basically was passed that said that children under the age of 16, under the age of 18 would now require a parental consent in order to be married. And when I'm reading that and I'm like, wait a second. So you're saying before this, they didn't need parental consent? And as you can hear, the pitch in my voice was the same shock that came over me when I heard this story on the radio. I'm like, no, I got to research this. Whose voice? Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, thank you to everyone who has checked out the podcast and continues to listen. If you have been listening for quite some time, and if you are new to the podcast, I say welcome and salute. We appreciate you taking some time out of your day to listen to the podcast. It is always greatly appreciated. If you want to be notified when the podcast drops, we do encourage you to subscribe to the podcast. We are on all podcast platforms, and a new video drops every Friday at 3 p.m. Thank you. Today, I want to get into child marriage. And if you're like me, and maybe not, you are who you are, and that is perfectly fine with me. But if you're like me, when I first heard the term, or I should say recently, when I heard the term child marriage, I have to admit that in almost in a biased way, when I hear child marriage, I'm thinking, outside of the U.S., maybe, smaller nations, third world countries, where, that might be part of the culture, and maybe in terms of the development of the area hasn't recognized that, that may not be the best for a child. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is when I first heard this, I was thinking, okay, this must be about somewhere outside of the United States. But surprisingly, no, today I'm going to be talking about child marriage here in the United States. And what many people may not realize is that not only is child marriage still occurring here in the United States, but it is very much legal in the majority of the states. And I'm going to get into that because, one of the reasons in doing the research that this information is not as prevalent as I think it should be, or because it's still a practice here in the United States, is because many people, including myself, think or already thought that this was an outdated practice here in the United States, but it is not. So today I want to talk about child marriage. Child marriage specifically in the U.S. I'm going to talk about some of the challenges, obvious, I should say obvious challenges. Well, not obvious, but some of the challenges with child marriage in terms of what it does to a child who is most affected. I want to talk about some of the states that will you'd be surprised, some of the states where it's still legal, and I'll talk about some of the specifications for that. And then of course, as always, want to give some form of remedy what a parent or a child who is not wanting to be married, or for parents who want to avoid for their children to have to marry at a young age. And when I say children, I'm talking about under 18 years old. Only because in the United States you're designated as an adult at 18, but that's up for debate. But specifically today, I'm talking about children under 18 years old. So I want to talk about child marriage here in the United States. And this came about because there was recently a bill, and this bill was passed over in West Virginia. Okay. This is recently, like within the last week, okay, that a bill basically was passed that said that children under the age of 16, under the age of 18 would now require parental, a parental consent in order to be married. And when I'm reading that and I'm like, wait a second. So you're saying before this, they didn't need parental consent? And as you can hear, the pitch in my voice was the same shock that came over me when I heard this story on the radio. I'm like, no, I got to research this. So this is what prompted me to talk about this today. And so let me read this article, and this is from AP, and they talked about this. And again, this is a recent decision, this just literally in the last 30 days. And I'll just read a little bit of the article here from AP News. It says, a child marriage bill is heading to West Virginia's governor's desk after lawmakers agreed to let 16 and 17-year-olds get married with restrictions. Now, prior to this bill being passed by the Virginia Senate and being signed off by the governor, West Virginia. Prior to this bill being signed off, it says here that children could marry as young as 16 years old in West Virginia with parent consent. But now listen to this. It said anyone younger than that, regardless of age, can get married with a judge's waiver. And I'm saying to myself, and for those of you who have listened to the show for a long time now, we've been doing this for about a year, you have heard me talk about repeatedly that I do have a daughter who is now in college. And of course, when I heard this story, my mind immediately shifted to my own daughter. And, bar the veins popping in my neck just thinking about this at 13 years old, that someone would dare to even suggest to me that they were going to marry my daughter. It sent me into a whole nother space. But reading the article, I'm like, wait a second. What do you mean a judge can authorize somebody younger than 16 to get married? And so I'm going to talk about that, why that is, and some of the obviously ramifications that come from that. But just to finish out on this bill here, and this was in West Virginia, it said that the bill passed. It would remove the possibility that anyone younger than 16 could get married. So again, prior to this bill being passed, people under 16 years old could get married if a judge provided a waiver. So literally, the potential husband to be, so to speak, could go to a judge and say, I want to marry the young woman. I don't want to start throwing names out there and get stereotypical, but I want to marry this young woman. I love her. And the judge, based on his consent, could waive the fact that she or he, don't want to be discriminatory, is under 18 years old or under 16 years old, and they could be married. But as of the Saturday, as of the recent passing of this bill, it removes the possibility that anyone younger than 16 could get married. Also, those ages 16 and 17 would have to obtain parental consent, and they couldn't marry someone more than 4 years older than them. And that is key. And I'm going to talk about that because that is a crucial part of children being married when they are marrying older spouses. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And then it also, just to finish out, and again, I'm reading from an AP article regarding this. It says existing legal marriages, including those done in other states, would be unaffected. So basically, even though this bill recently passed in West Virginia that now outlaws anyone under 16 years old from getting married, if there were any marriages prior to this in the state or outside the state, those marriages would still stay in effect. So that's what prompted me to want to talk about this today. Now, I hit on several key points, but one of the key points is that with this new bill in West Virginia, a person more than 4 years older than the potential spouse could not get married. So somebody 20 who wanted to marry a 16-year-old or 17-year-old with parental consent could get married in West Virginia. But anyone older than that, it would be, illegal to do. And obviously, additional criminal charges would be pending, statutory rape and things of that nature. But I don't want to go too deep into that. So, like I said, that's one of the key parts of this. And the reason I point this out is because I'm reading an article here from from UNICEF, and they detailed this same crisis, if you will, or same story about child marriage in the U.S. Matter of fact, they have an article on here saying the fight continues to end child marriage in the United States. But in that article, they talked about the age difference. And I'm going to read right here from the article. It says, one of the challenges is that it says closing the loopholes in state marriage laws is crucial. It's a crucial step to protecting, obviously, the rights of children to reach their full potential. One of the things that they point out here, though, they say that in 86% of child marriages in the U.S. involved a girl, getting married to a significantly older man. Instead of permitting child marriage, state governments should invest in systems that support girls and their families. But I wanted to point that out. In 86% of child marriages in the United States, it involves an older man marrying a younger woman. Matter of fact, let me play this clip because this is an exact example of that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. But there's there was a piece done for by Voice of America, and they interviewed a young woman out of Tennessee who married young. I want you to hear her story. I'm going to play a little bit of it, then I'm going to stop it, talk a little bit, and then play a little bit more because I kind of want to play it in its entirety. I normally don't do that, but this is an exact example of why, number one, child marriages should be outlawed. And I'm going to talk about some of the states where it's still legal. It's going to blow your mind. But let me play this, and then we'll continue the conversation. But this is wild right here.
When I was like, I met him about when I was like 13, 14. They lived next door to me and hung out with his family and his friend or his sisters, and I don't know, we just kind of started becoming friends, and I got attached to him. I had probably a little crush, you know what I'm saying? And he couldn't never keep a girlfriend because they didn't like me being around them. So one thing after another, after a few years, we just kind of ended up together.
Now, I'm stopping in here because, first of all, one of the things that often happens, especially with young child marriages, is that there's usually an older guy, as I indicated, in 86% of the cases. But what happens is there's almost a grooming that begins because, as you heard in this piece here, she met this gentleman, and it does not say how much older he is, but she was 13, 14. He was already a grown man. Okay. And looking at the video that I'm playing this from, he doesn't, he looks like, and he doesn't look, like he's 30 years older than her. Maybe it was a 10-year, 15-year difference. I don't know. But regardless of the fact, if you're 23 years old and you start hanging around a 13-year-old, that grooming process that occurs is something that is often talked about in child marriages. And key information, oftentimes it's someone who is associated with the family in some way, whether it's a family friend or a friend of a friend or a father's friend, things of that nature. That's where it usually starts. But I wanted to play that so you can kind of hear directly from an individual who was a young bride, an underage bride, I should say, and some of the steps that led to that. But let me keep playing this.
I got pregnant underage, and that was kind of what had us go ahead and get married so I wouldn't send him to jail. A lot of people look down on him for it and stuff. That's kind of why he didn't want to do this at first, but like I told him, I don't care what anybody thinks. I love him, it is what it is.
So again, and I'm going to, stop and go a little bit further, but so clearly she was underage, right? She was 13 or 14 when she met him. She was 15, 16 when they were having sex, probably younger than that because she had her daughter at 16 years old. To avoid him going to jail, right, they decided to get married. Now, I can only imagine that this has to be the thought of the older man saying, well, let's get married. I don't want to go to jail. How can a 16-year-old even process this? So again, here's another case, or I should say another example of what occurs with young child marriages here in the United States of America. See, there was a grooming process, then a child is on the way to avoid jail time for statutory rape. They decided to get married. But let me continue to play this, and then I'll continue from here.
I mean, we're like any other marriage couple. We've had our problems. I mean, we split up. I went and stayed with them for a little bit, but we just know we want to live with each other. We want to be with each other, you know what I mean? So we work through our problems. I couldn't live without them.
And again, now, at this point, she has looks like about maybe a 6, 7 year old child. So she's probably 22, 23 now talking about this. Okay. Or I should say when this piece was done, which was a few years ago. But in any event, 7 years later, she now, not only is she in this relationship, she has a child, but she has now become almost, if you will, mentally dependent on him. Because as you heard, she said, I can't live without him. But she doesn't know anything else because she met this man when she was just a child. But I want to play a little bit more of this because she talks about something that I wanted to point out. But I just want to kind of get through this, and then, I'll, go from there. Okay. Yep. So it's right here. I want you to hear this, and then I'll switch over and kind of talk about some of the states where this is still legal.
I did not graduate after I had Zena. Got hard to get a babysitter and stuff. Needed money. Candace got me the job. I just dropped out, and they kind of just let me slip through the cracks. I made it to 11th grade. I had one more year. Should have finished it out, honestly. I regret that every day. Eventually, I'll get my GED, but growing up life is really hard. So, Well, before I married, honestly, I was a kid, so there was really no bills. I don't really miss nothing about it except just having to grow up and do the adult thing, man. It's hard. It is hard, but other than that, I don't really miss nothing.
And she also talks about because they asked her, would you allow your daughter to do the same things? And I want you to hear what she says after going through all of this, right? You heard she met the man at 13, 14. She began to have sex with him. They had a baby. They got married. I can't live without him. But listen to what she says about if her daughter that she now has would be able to do the same things, or if she came to her with the same request.
My mom always asked me if I would let her get with somebody older. No, I probably won't, because, we did have a lot of issues it put me through a lot, mentally and physically, and I would not let my daughter do that.
So now, I wanted to play that, and like you guys who know the show, I don't normally play that much of a piece, but it was so compelling to hear directly from a individual who made this decision. And again, this is not 1925. Okay, this is 2000. That piece there was from 2019. And today, 2023, child marriage is still legal in the United States. So let me talk about that here. But let me go back a little bit. So some of the effects of children getting married at a young age, and again, as I pointed out, 86% of the time when child marriages occur, it's usually a older man and a younger woman. I'm reading a study here from the International Center for Research on Women. And they kind of broke this down in terms of what are some of the impacts on young women when they decide to get married at a young age, or get married here before 19 years old. Now, they said before 19, but I'm talking about much younger as well. So first of all, they say girls who marry before the age of 19 are 50% more likely than unmarried girls to drop out of high school, as you heard from Kirsten, and that was the person in the piece from the Voice of America. She dropped out of high school at 11th grade. So they're 50% more likely to drop out of high school, 4 times less likely to complete college. But here's the astounding facts, at least I thought it was. Women who marry before the age of 19 are 23% at greater risk of developing diabetes, cancer, or having a heart attack or a stroke. And as you heard Kirsten talk about in that piece, was that she's had a lot of challenges mentally and physically, obviously dealing with the transition of going from a child to a wife to a mother. before the age of 18. They say that approximately 4 out of 5 marriages involving girls below the age of 15 end in death, divorce, or separation. And then they also say that 18 out of 20 women that participated in a study in 2019 that were in child marriages reported experiencing physical, sexual, emotional abuse by the hands of their husbands. And that is also very key information because all of the data that I've researched shows that domestic violence, or the opportunity, or I should not say opportunity, but the chance of domestic violence increases dramatically with women who have married under the age of 18 years old. And that domestic violence, as is noted here, is usually at the hands of their husband that they've decided, or I should say, became married to. So that I wanted to talk about some of the risk factors that come along with that, because I thought that was, super information regarding that. But let me get into the states, because that's what I really wanted to talk about, because this is going to blow your mind. This is out of here. It's out of here. The states that allow marriage under the age of 18, there are 43 states. Let me just double check. I'm going to read it directly. I'm reading from worldpopulationreview.com. Let's see. It says 43 states that allow marriage under the age of 18. 43. Now let me, and I know I'm not teasing it. Because as you reading something, you're like, wow, I'm blown away myself. But let me go through the states. So first of all, I wanted to talk about the states where it's over 18, where you have to be 18 years old to get married. Let me see. There are. Okay, let me move forward, and I'll fall back to that. But so states with no minimum age. Let me go there first. There are 11 states that have no minimum age when it comes to marriage. No minimum age. This is not like smoke and mirrors. Literally, you can pull this information up yourself. As you always know, I'm going to put it in the links for the video, and also for the podcast. Worldpopulationreview.com. You can search it yourself. States, 11 states that have no minimum age requirements at all. These states are California, Idaho, Maine, Michigan, Mississippi, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, Washington, West Virginia, and Wyoming. No minimum age, okay? Now they have the states that allow for marriage with parental consent, okay? You have basically most states allow for marriage with parental consent, but you have to be 16 years old to get parental consent, okay? Most of the states. Now, with parental consent, without parental consent, most states 18 years old, okay? So just so we have that clear. But listen to this. This is what blew me out the water. In Mississippi, the age of consent to marry with parental consent for males is 17 years old. So with parental consent, a male can get married in Mississippi at 17. At 15 years old, females can get married in Mississippi with parental consent. In Rhode Island, Puerto Rico, New Hampshire, I'm sorry. Let me backtrack. So yeah, Ohio, Rhode Island, Puerto Rico, and Arkansas, and Delaware. With parental consent, the ages are basically 17 and 18. But this was the one that caught me. New Hampshire. Age of consent to marry with parental consent for males is 14 years old. In New Hampshire, if you are 14 years old and you have a parent sign off, you can get married. In New Hampshire, if you are 13 years old and you are a female with parental consent, you can get married. This is in the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen. I am not talking about some foreign land. I'm talking about the United States of America. Okay? That's the information. But I did want to talk about the states where both parties have to be 18 years old. So I think I talked about that, but Delaware, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island have recently set their minimum age to 18 and eliminated all exceptions. So now in those states, you have to be 18. There's no with or without parental consent. If you're not 18, you can't get married. Again, that's in Delaware, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. And I want to point out, these are recent changes. Like literally in the last 5 years, where this law has changed to with or without consent. That at least in these states where you have to be 18, you can't go to your parent. If you're not 18, you can't get married. Okay. So I talked about the problems. Let's talk about what are some of the things that you can do as a parent to educate and protect your child. Because, I try to be objective when I give these stories, but I can't be objective, right? I have a daughter. This, in my opinion, is predatory, period, point blank. There's no reason why a grown man should be marrying a child under the age of 18. Under the age of 17. Well, for me, 18, but definitely 13 and 14. I mean, it's predatory and it's statutory rape because it's going to lead to sex. And I firmly believe anybody that is engaged in that needs to be locked up. So I want to make sure my point is clear before we close out. But some of the things that you can do as parents, as maybe guardians of younger girls, and I'm specifically talking to girls because all the data suggests that it's usually older men trying to marry younger girls. You can empower your girls with information. That's the best thing. Explain to them about the ramifications and some of the fallout that can come from getting married young, and obviously sex and things of that nature. Number two, provide economic support and incentives to girls and their families. Oftentimes, many of these studies point out that the girls that are getting married are coming from impoverished communities or families. And sometimes it is seen as a way of getting away from that. So economic support can be provided. That can definitely, turn the tables as well and prevent some of this. Educate and rally parents and community members. That's what we're doing today. We're getting the information out, and we're encouraging you to search it yourself because, again, this is not a one-off, ladies and gentlemen. This is legal in the United States. Enhance girls' access to higher quality education. Education, it is a game changer in so many aspects of life, but definitely it'll make an impact here. And then last but not least, encourage supportive laws and policies to end child marriage and meet the needs of children. And I agree. I talk about this pretty much, it seems like every other podcast, but you have to get involved. These laws that are on the books are there because, number one, There's a generation of people who don't like change. Number two, there's another generation of people who don't have the information. And then number three, there's another generation of people who just don't care, not my problem, until it becomes their problem. These type of situations is everyone's problem. And the only way that you can change that is through information and changing laws, making it illegal in the United States for child marriage to continue. So that is what I wanted to talk about today. As always, we appreciate your attention. If you find this information helpful, please feel free to share it. If you want to leave a comment, you can reach us at any of the social media platforms. You can reach me at I am Trey Evans. That is I am Trey Evans. And you can reach me at Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also reach us at the show podcast Instagram, which is the People's Voice Podcast. The People's Voice Podcast. So as always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute. The People's Voice.